This is the first video in a series looking at Main Roads Specification 202 for traffic management and why it is failing active transport users more often than not. Now I'm going to look at it in conjunction with the Main Roads Daily Diary template and the 2025 FAQ explaining the mandatory video recording requirements for detours. Now I want to be clear on one point before we start, and that is the system that's been set up for managing detours for motor vehicles works really well. I have no issues with it. Where it's failing is when the same system is applied to active transport detours without any pertinent adjustments that clearly define what the contractors must be doing on a daily basis. Now, if just the daily diary process was being carried out properly at the Fremantle traffic bridge, I wouldn't be making any of these videos. So if we have a look at section 202.63, which covers the daily diary stuff, very clearly spells out that a daily diary must be kept for each location where we've got traffic management. It's got to include details of non-compliances, and non-compliances can be things like signs falling over and they have to put them back up. Now, section 65 looks at video recording, and it makes it pretty clear that you've got to video record all traffic control devices that are implemented as part of the contract. You've got to include all the detours and sidetracks. You've got to record in both directions. And the timings are also important. So it spells out they've got to record at they've got to inspect and record at the start of the day, the end of the day, when any changes are made to the layout, and at least every 4 hours after the start of the day. Now the daily diary repeats most of these same ideas. It says you've got to do a drive-through video recording that says signs have to be upright, clean, visible, level and stable. It says cyclists and pedestrians must be catered for, although it doesn't spell out what that means. But in this case, it says checks need to be carried out at least every 2 hours rather than every 4 hours. The other document is the FAQ on video recording, and you'll notice at the top it says mandatory. So that makes pretty clear it's mandatory. It also spells out it applies to existing contracts. So this came out at the start of 2025. The Fremantle Traffic Bridge project, for instance, was already going ahead at that point, so it would apply to that contract. And in this case, as far as when the recording needs to be done, this says the start of the day, the end of the day. It says nothing about changes to signage, and it just says during work hours. It doesn't say every 2 hours or 4 hours. Question 7, the answer there says it applies to paths as well, so it's not just roads, although it doesn't say whether that's footpaths, shared paths, or principal shared paths. When we go over the page, question 9, it talks about the requirements for dash cams, and that the video needs to be stored for 7 days. So that's all good. Well, what are the issues that we've got here? Well, there's no mention of bicycle in specification 202 at all. That same document mentions cyclists 6 times, but none of that is very specific or useful. It says nothing about how path inspections are supposed to be recorded. It just talks about inspections of the roads for motor vehicles. And there's no mention of a bicycle dash cam requirement. It just talks about a motor vehicle requirement. There's nothing about, it just says regular inspections. It doesn't say, or doesn't define the inspection intervals for paths. And so where we have an issue here is whether you've got a project manager or a contractor who is going to apply this based on the letter of the specification rather than the spirit. If they're applying the spirit of the specification, you end up with something like the Balloo Bridge project, which was fantastic. If they apply the letter of the specification, you end up with something like the Fremantle Traffic Bridge, which is an absolute disaster from a cycling perspective. So, we're at 3 requirements essentially. Now, the first is regular inspections of paths. Now, if you're following the spirit of the specification, and you're asked the question, how often should we be inspecting the cyclist detours? Well, I would say, given that we have to drive through the start of the shift, end of the shift, at least every 2 to 4 hours, etc., I reckon we need to do at least a daily inspection of the cycle path. But if you're following the letter, then you go, well, there is no mention in here of how regularly I need to do an inspection. So I'm just not going to do them at all. Because regular could mean we inspect once at the start of the project, and that's regular enough, and we'll only go back and do an inspection when a formal complaint is lodged. Similarly, when it comes to the recording requirement, Now again, if I was following the spirit of this and it says you've got to record paths, I'll go, okay, I need to, lash up something on my bicycle to record my daily inspections. Whereas if you're following the letter of the specification, you go, well, there's nothing in here about how I'm supposed to record a path or what I'm supposed to be using when I record the path. I'm just going to ignore it and not record whatsoever. Then you've got the requirement of how to do an inspection. Now that's kind of assumed in the specification for doing it on the road because it talks about vehicles and dash cams. I think it's just assumed that the contractors will have a plethora of Rangers or Hiluxes and they just stick dash cams in them. But how do you inspect a principal shared path or a shared path or a footpath that you can't drive a Ranger along? So if you're following the spirit of the requirement, you go, it's a cycle path, I can't drive on it, I better go and get a bicycle from somewhere. Whereas if you're following the letter of it, you go, it doesn't mention bicycles. In fact, we're going to ban the use of bicycles and scooters on OH&S grounds, and we're just not going to inspect the bicycle and pedestrian detours at all, and we're not going to record them. So how are we going to fix this? Well, the first thing is to say, okay, bicycle detours must be inspected by bike. Footpaths must be inspected on foot. And on-road detours must be inspected from a car. That's pretty simple. Now, I'd also add a section on bicycle dash cams and just define how they can be used, or at least they must be used. And you've got to define the regularity of path inspections. Just saying regular is not enough. The specifications are very, very specific when it comes to doing on-road inspections. I'll repeat it again, start of shift, end of shift, when any changes are made to the signage, depending on which document you're reading, every 2 hours, every 4 hours. So for cycle or footpath inspections, let's say we just need to do it once a day at the start of shift. That'll do. That's better than what we have today. Let's just start with that. And I would also either publish an updated FAQ or a new FAQ explaining how these bicycle inspections are supposed to be undertaken, when they're supposed to be undertaken, and how they're going to be recorded. So if we want to get specific in section 202.63, I would simply add in here that traffic management includes pedestrian and cycle traffic, not just motor vehicle traffic. And I know that might seem obvious to some people sitting in Main Roads headquarters that that's what traffic means. But a contractor might go, no, I interpret traffic as motor vehicles only. It's motorbikes, buses, trucks, cars, that's it. People walking around and cycling and scootering, that's not traffic, they don't have a motor. Sorry. And so they just ignore it. No, define it very, very clearly. You could even say pedestrian, scooter, cycle, wheelchair, pensioner, gopher vehicle, whatever. In .65, as far as recording goes, I would expand this all traffic control devices to include, and I know that again this might seem completely obvious, but it seems this has to be done, include signage on footpaths, shared paths and PSPs, because again, you could have a contractor going, no, traffic control devices, they only apply to motor vehicles. Traffic control devices, I know we put signs out on the footpath, but that they are controlling pedestrians and pedestrians are not traffic, or they're controlling cyclists and cyclists aren't traffic because they're not on the road. You get I hope you might get the distinction in the thinking of how some people might interpret this. So you've got to be really, really specific and define it carefully. So again, section B, I'd be expanding that to say the condition of any detours, sidetracks, footpaths, shared paths, PSPs, etc. And then I'd add another section on the end. Video recordings must be captioned in both directions on any footpaths, shared paths or PSPs that are covered in the TSG. That'll be section F. And the timing, in section 4, you need to be quite pedantic and specific here to say something like, bicycle inspection or bicycle detour inspections must be carried out and recorded once per day at start of shift at a minimum. Fixing the daily diary. Now, there's two ways you could do this. One would be to amend the existing daily diary. The second would be to issue a daily diary for active transport detours, which would be pretty much the same as this, but just with a couple of minor changes. So, and that would only apply to a work site which involved pedestrian and cyclist detours. So where it's got drive-through checks, just make it drive-through and ride-through video recording. So that's the first check you're doing. Ride-through intervals must be defined, and as I said, for ride-through, you might say, look, we just need one at the start of the shift every day. That's fine. And if you're going to make this more cycling and pedestrian specific, I'd talk about vegetation. Ouch. I know this is something that doesn't impact on motor vehicles so much, but a long-term project, again, like the Fremantle Traffic Bridge project, goes for a couple of years. The paths that are being used, one of them goes through a bit of bushland. What do shrubs and bushes and trees do? They grow, particularly in spring. So you can end up with branches growing out across the path at head height or chest height that'll whack people. So you need to have a site check in there which essentially says is the vegetation on the paths, shared paths, footpaths cut back to a safe distance for cyclists and pedestrians. The video recording FAQ, like I said, you could just amend this. So, in question 7, you could say, video recording of temporary arrangements for cyclists must be carried out using a bicycle or tricycle. Just define it. Just say you've got to use a bicycle or a tricycle. And in question 3, the bicycle you're using must be fitted with an appropriate, action camera or bicycle specific camera. Now, you could go and issue another FAQ to this because contractors are going to say, well, we've never done this before. How do we fit out a bicycle? What sort of bicycle do we go and get? What's it going to cost? How do we fit it out, etc.? So you could put out a new FAQ saying, okay, well, if you just want a basic bike, you can get one online for $700. This will do the job because you're not riding 50 kilometers. Most of these detours are like maybe a kilometer and a half in each direction. You're doing it once a day. That's 3 Ks a day. You don't need a $10,000 carbon bike to do that. Now, if you're worried about the fitness of some of the people doing it, there might be some hills in the detour, well, you could upgrade to a basic e-bike. We're not talking electric motorbike. We're talking electric assist bike, where the electric assist cuts out at 25 kilometers an hour. With 100 kilometers of range, you could probably go a month between charges doing a daily inspection. Now, if you're really concerned about your people doing the inspection falling over, well, you go and get them a tricycle. You can get a really cheap one from Big W for $433. It's even got a basket in the back. You could carry the TSGs with you if they're printed out. You carry some secateurs for cutting back vegetation. You carry your cable ties, etc. for fixing signage. You could even carry some basic signage in the back there if you wanted to. And you could ride all of these in work boots and work pants and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you if falls are a concern and fitness is a concern, and you're worried you can't carry enough signage, well, you can upgrade to a $5,500 electric tricycle. No one's going to fall off it. They're not going to have a heart attack riding it, and they don't even have to walk, a couple of hundred meters carrying signage down a path because they can't drive a ute down there. They can just stick the signs in the cargo thing and off they go. So that, there's your bike options covered, and or the kind of bikes covered. As far as video recording goes, there's a plethora of action cameras on the market. From El Cheapo Timo models, for $70 up to, I don't know, $700. The main thing is you want to get a bicycle camera which comes with a handlebar mounting. That's the important thing. Now, thing to note is these are cameras only. They're not a combined camera light. We'll get onto that in a sec. And do you want people to have helmet-mounted cameras? I would say no, just in case they fall over and the helmet hits the ground. You don't want a camera mounted on it. You might want to specifically rule those out. Now, you can get bicycle-specific combined video cameras and lights. The Garmin is about $900. I've got the Fly 12 Sport on my bike. That's what I use. It's about $600. And they come with all the mounts and all the rest of it. And the beauty of this is you know, it's also got a light built into it. I have the flashing light going all the time in daylight. So if you are doing inspections, it means, you know, if there's other people on the path, they can see you coming. It's just, for me, I think it's a safer option. Now, I also record my face when I'm doing these things on my phone. And I also record the video so I can talk about what I am seeing as I go along. And of course, this is entirely optional, but you can go and get a quad lock kit for an iPhone, for instance, that you can mount your phone on the handlebars, tilt it up properly, use the front video camera to record yourself, about 150 bucks. As far as recording of your voice goes, you can upgrade. Look, you can get a lav microphone, a wired one, for about 40 bucks, and that's what I had originally. The problem with it is the cable is a real pain, the management of it. You do need something like a separate microphone if you're riding at speed because of all the wind noise. You tend not to be able to, you know, you just hear this on the, if you're using the phone microphone. So, you know, I've got the Rode Wireless Go system. You know, that's probably a bit of overkill for what's required here, but you know, if people want to do that, it's an option. You can put this in the FAQ if you like it or not. So look, in summary, what are we looking for here in these 3 documents? You know, firstly, bike detours, they must be inspected by bike. You know, you can't just drive along the road next to them and have a look. You've got to get on your bike and inspect it. You've got to define the timing of the bike inspections. Is once a day at the start of the day sufficient? If so, put that in all the documentation. Amend all the documentation to say, you know, you must be doing a daily inspection at a minimum. You know, I think going the whole hog of start a day, finish a day every 4 hours is probably overkill. Once a day is probably okay. The bike inspections, like the car inspections, they've got to be recorded. So you need to go and get yourself some kind of camera which you can mount on the handlebars of your bike. We're going to produce an FAQ covering all of this, so you know what sorts of bikes you could possibly go and get, what sorts of cameras you could get, etc. And look, the most important thing I reckon is after this, apply section 202.64 and do some traffic management audits. Go out, see how these things are being used, see what the results are like, talk to the people doing the surveys, and I guess talk to you know, the cyclist in the area to say, look, we're doing daily inspections, we're recording them. Are you seeing an improvement in the quality and safety of this detour? And if the answer is yes, well, it's all good. If no, well, go back and fine tune the specification. If the contractors are reporting issues with it, go back and, you know, fine tune the spec or fine tune the FAQ. But you know, I think the traffic management audits are crucial to make sure this thing works properly. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to go for a ride and record something else.